Welcome. Get comfortable, settle in, and let your breathing slow down naturally. Tonight, we're going to explore the foundations of learning and understanding skills quickly, and we'll do it in a way that lets your mind drift peacefully as you absorb these ideas. There's no pressure here, no need to remember everything. Just listen, relax, and let the words wash over you. Let's begin with the first idea. Treat learning as a long-term, daily practice instead of a one-time sprint. You see, our brains weren't designed for cramming or for massive bursts of effort followed by nothing. They're designed for consistency, for small, repeated exposures over time. When you approach learning as something you do a little bit each day, you're working with your brain's natural rhythms instead of against them. Think of it like watering a plant. You wouldn't pour a month's worth of water on it all at once and expect it to thrive. You water it regularly, day after day, and it grows steadily. Learning works the same way. The daily practice might seem small, almost insignificant on any given day, but over weeks and months, it compounds into something remarkable. So release the pressure of trying to master everything quickly. Instead, embrace the gentle rhythm of daily practice. Now, let's move to the second principle. Align the skill with a meaningful personal reason, understanding why it matters to you right now. This is about connecting what you're learning to something deeper in your life. Maybe you want to learn a new language because you're planning to travel, or you want to understand coding because you have an idea for an app that could help people. Whatever the skill, when you anchor it to a personal why, your brain treats it differently. It stops being an abstract obligation and becomes something connected to your identity, your goals, your future self. Motivation isn't just about willpower. It's about meaning. When you know why something matters, the how becomes easier. Your brain naturally prioritizes information that feels relevant to your life. So take a moment, even now as you're drifting, to think about what you want to learn and why it truly matters to you. The third idea is beautifully simple. Set one clear learning goal per cycle. Not 5 goals, not 10. 1. Our attention is a limited resource, and when we scatter it across too many targets, we end up making slow progress on all of them. But when you focus that attention like a laser beam on a single, well-defined goal, magic happens. You might define a cycle as a week, a month, or whatever time frame makes sense for you. During that cycle, you have one primary objective. Maybe it's to learn the basics of a new software program, or to understand a particular concept in depth. Whatever it is, that singular focus allows your brain to build clear neural pathways without getting confused by competing priorities. It's not that you can't learn multiple things in your life. It's that you learn each thing better when you give it dedicated, focused time. Closely related is our fourth principle. Define what good enough looks like to avoid the trap of perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the greatest enemies of learning because it sets an impossible standard that keeps you from ever feeling satisfied or complete. When you're learning something new, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be functional, competent, good enough to achieve what you set out to do. Before you start learning, ask yourself what success actually looks like. If you're learning to cook, maybe good enough means being able to prepare 5 healthy meals confidently. It doesn't mean becoming a Michelin star chef. If you're learning graphic design, maybe good enough means being able to create professional-looking social media posts. It doesn't mean rivaling the world's top designers. When you define this standard in advance, you give yourself permission to stop when you've reached it, to feel accomplished, and to move forward without the endless pursuit of an unreachable ideal. The fifth principle follows naturally. Focus on one main skill at a time instead of juggling many. This might sound similar to setting one goal, but it goes deeper. It's about recognizing that your brain's learning machinery works best when it can devote its resources to building one coherent skill set. When you try to learn guitar, Spanish, programming, and watercolor painting all at once, you're forcing your brain to constantly switch contexts, to maintain multiple sets of developing neural pathways simultaneously. This creates interference. What you learn in one domain can actually make it harder to consolidate learning in another when they're happening at the same time. But when you sequence your learning, focusing deeply on one skill until you reach competence before moving to the next, each skill gets the full power of your attention and your brain's learning mechanisms. This doesn't mean you can't have hobbies or interests on the side. It means you designate one skill as your primary learning focus during any given period. Now we arrive at the sixth idea, and it's transformative. Break big skills into small sub-skills, what we might call micro-skills. Every complex skill is actually a bundle of smaller skills working together. If you want to learn public speaking, that includes voice projection, storytelling, body language, managing anxiety, reading an audience, and more. If you try to improve all of these at once, it's overwhelming. But if you break the big skill down and work on one micro skill at a time, suddenly the impossible becomes manageable. You might spend a week just focusing on voice projection, practicing exercises, getting feedback. Then you move to storytelling structure, then body language. Over time, these micro skills integrate naturally, and you find yourself competent at the larger skill without ever having felt overwhelmed by it. This approach also gives you more frequent wins, more moments of measurable progress, which keeps you motivated throughout the learning journey. The seventh principle adds focus to this breakdown. Apply the 80-20 rule to identify high-impact subskills. Not all microskills are created equal. Some will give you disproportionate returns on your investment of time and effort. The 80-20 rule, also called the Pareto principle, suggests that roughly 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. In learning, this means that some subskills are far more important than others. If you're learning a language, a small number of common words and phrases will cover the vast majority of everyday conversation. If you're learning an instrument, certain fundamental techniques will unlock a huge range of songs. The key is to identify these high-leverage subskills early and prioritize them. Don't get distracted by the exotic or the advanced until you've mastered the fundamentals that give you the most capability. This is how people seem to learn quickly. They're not necessarily working harder. They're working smarter, focusing on what matters most. Our eighth principle taps into the power of your imagination. Visualize yourself performing the skill successfully. Your brain has a remarkable property. It doesn't always distinguish clearly between vividly imagining an action and actually performing it. When you visualize yourself executing a skill, playing that piece of music, delivering that presentation, solving that problem, you're actually activating many of the same neural pathways that fire when you do the real thing. Athletes have known this for decades. Olympic performers spend significant time mentally rehearsing their performances. You can do the same with any skill. Before you practice, spend a few minutes seeing yourself in your mind's eye, performing the skill with confidence and competence. Notice how it feels, what you see, what you hear. This mental rehearsal primes your brain, reduces anxiety, and actually improves your physical performance when you do the real practice. It's not magic, it's neuroscience. The ninth principle gives you a practical tool to overcome one of learning's biggest obstacles. Use implementation intentions to beat procrastination. An implementation intention is a specific plan that follows this format. When situation X arises, I will perform action Y. Instead of saying, I'll practice guitar more, you say, when I finish dinner, I will practice guitar for 20 minutes in the living room. This specificity bypasses the decision-making moment where procrastination usually sneaks in. Your brain already knows what to do and when to do it, so there's no mental negotiation, no moment of weakness. Research shows that implementation intentions dramatically increase the likelihood that you'll follow through on your learning goals. It's such a simple technique, but it's incredibly powerful. You're essentially creating an if-then rule that automates the behavior you want to cultivate. Finally, our 10th principle for this segment reframes a common experience. Treat confusion as a signal to dig deeper, not as failure. When you're learning something new, confusion is inevitable. It's a sign that your brain is encountering new patterns, new information that doesn't yet fit into your existing mental models. Many people interpret confusion as evidence that they're not smart enough or that they can't learn the skill. But confusion is actually the feeling of learning happening. It's the mental discomfort of your brain rewiring itself. The key is to welcome it, to get curious about it. When you feel confused, that's your signal to ask better questions, to seek out additional explanations, to approach the material from a different angle. Confusion is where growth lives. It's the border between what you know and what you're about to know. So next time you feel that fog of uncertainty, smile, take a breath, and lean into it with curiosity rather than pulling back in frustration. These 10 principles form the foundation of a learning mindset that makes acquiring new skills not just faster, but more enjoyable and sustainable. Treat learning as a daily practice, connect it to personal meaning, focus on one clear goal at a time, define good enough, concentrate on one skill, break it into micro skills, identify the high-impact ones, visualize success, create implementation intentions, and embrace confusion. With these principles guiding you, you're not just learning faster, you're learning wiser. And as you drift now towards sleep, let these ideas settle gently into your mind, ready to serve you whenever you choose to learn something new. Let your breathing deepen as we move into our second segment. You're doing wonderfully, just listening, absorbing, letting these ideas settle into your mind like gentle snowflakes. Now we're going to explore how to design practice that actually works, practice that transforms knowledge into skill. The first principle here is powerful. Practice at the edge of your ability, in what researchers call the zone of desirable difficulty. Imagine a place right at the boundary of what you can currently do. Not so easy that you're bored, not so hard that you're completely lost, but right there at the edge where you're challenged but capable. This is where learning accelerates. When practice is too easy, your brain coasts, making few new connections. When it's impossibly hard, your brain gives up, unable to find patterns to learn from. But at that edge, that sweet spot of struggle, your brain is maximally engaged, building new neural pathways, strengthening connections, growing. You'll know you're in the right zone when you're making mistakes, but understanding why. When you feel stretched but not broken. This might feel uncomfortable at first, and that's the point. Growth lives in discomfort. So instead of staying in your comfort zone or leaping into the panic zone, find that learning zone right at the edge. The second principle refines this idea further. Use deliberate practice by isolating a weakness and drilling it specifically. Most people practice by doing the whole skill from start to finish, and that has its place. But deliberate practice is different. It means you identify the specific part of the skill where you're weakest, you extract it, and you practice just that component over and over with full concentration until it improves. A musician might isolate a difficult measure and play it 50 times. A writer might practice just writing compelling opening sentences. An athlete might drill a specific movement pattern. This targeted approach feels less fun than just doing the whole thing, but it's dramatically more effective. You're not spreading your practice time across everything equally. You're investing it where you need it most, where each repetition will yield the greatest improvement. This is how people advance quickly. They don't waste time practicing what they already do well. Our third idea encourages courage. Regularly attempt tasks that are slightly harder than you feel ready for. There's a natural human tendency to wait until you feel completely prepared before trying something challenging. But that feeling of readiness rarely comes. Instead, growth comes from attempting things before you feel ready, from stretching into discomfort. If you're learning a language, Try having a real conversation before you've memorized all the vocabulary. If you're learning to code, try building a small project before you've completed all the tutorials. Yes, you'll make mistakes. Yes, it will be awkward. But this is where real learning happens. Your brain needs to confront the gaps in your knowledge in real contexts to know what to focus on. And you'll often surprise yourself by discovering you're more capable than you thought. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes from taking action despite uncertainty. The fourth principle offers a practical structure. Start each practice session by fixing yesterday's most common mistake. This creates a direct feedback loop between sessions. At the end of each practice, make a note of where you struggled most, where the errors clustered. Then when you begin your next session, don't dive into new material. Instead, spend the first few minutes specifically addressing that weakness. If you struggled with a particular concept, review it. If you made a repeated error, drill the correct version. This approach ensures you're constantly shoring up weaknesses rather than letting them persist. It also gives you early wins in each session, which builds momentum and confidence. Over time, this habit of addressing mistakes directly prevents them from becoming ingrained patterns. The fifth principle is about authenticity. Practice in conditions similar to real performance. This is called context-dependent learning. Your brain doesn't just learn skills in isolation. It learns them embedded in a context, an environment, a situation. If you always practice public speaking alone in your room, you'll struggle when you have to speak in front of an audience in a bright room. If you always do math problems in perfect silence, you might struggle during a timed test in a noisy classroom. So build elements of real performance into your practice. If you'll need to perform under pressure, practice under mild pressure. If you'll need to recall information quickly, practice quick recall. If you'll need to use the skill in a particular environment, practice there when possible. The more similar your practice conditions are to the real thing, the more readily your learning will transfer. Our sixth principle creates a learning accelerator. Alternate practice with quick feedback. Practice without feedback is just repetition. You might be reinforcing errors without knowing it. But when you practice, check your performance, get feedback, adjust, and practice again, you create a rapid learning cycle. The feedback can come from many sources. A teacher or coach, a recording of yourself, an answer key, a rubric, even your own informed judgment. The key is that the feedback is quick and specific. You need to know not just that you made a mistake, but what the mistake was and ideally how to correct it. And you need to know soon after the attempt, while the experience is fresh. This tight loop of attempt, feedback, adjust, attempt is the engine of skill acquisition. Don't practice for hours and then check your work. Practice briefly, check, adjust, practice again. The seventh idea shifts your learning approach. Use problem-based learning instead of only studying theory. There are two ways to learn. You can study principles and concepts and then apply them, or you can encounter problems and learn the concepts you need to solve them. Both have value, but problem-based learning is often more engaging and more effective. When you start with a real problem or project, your brain immediately understands why the learning matters. The knowledge has context and purpose from the beginning. So instead of reading a textbook cover to cover and then trying to use what you learned, try flipping it. Start with a project or problem that interests you, attempt it. Discover what you don't know, learn that specific knowledge, apply it, and continue. This approach maintains motivation and creates deeper understanding because you're not learning abstract concepts. You're learning tools to solve real challenges. The eighth principle introduces productive repetition. Revisit the same problems with small variations. If you solve a problem once and move on, you might remember the solution to that specific problem, but not develop flexible understanding. But if you solve the same type of problem multiple times with slight variations, your brain extracts the underlying pattern. It learns not just the solution, but the problem-solving approach. a math problem with different numbers, a writing exercise with a different prompt, a coding challenge with different inputs. These variations force your brain to think flexibly, to adapt the core concept to new situations. This is what separates people who can only repeat what they've practiced from people who can genuinely apply their skills in novel contexts. Our ninth principle might surprise you. Short, intense practice sessions beat long, unfocused marathons. There's a common belief that more practice is always better, but quality matters far more than quantity. Your brain's capacity for focused learning is limited. After a certain point, usually between 30 to 90 minutes depending on the skill and your experience level, your attention fades, your error rate increases, and you start reinforcing sloppy habits. But if you practice with complete focus for a shorter period, take a real break, and then practice again later, you can maintain high quality throughout. Multiple short, intense sessions across a day or week will produce better results than one long, gradually degrading session. So release any guilt about keeping sessions short. What matters is the intensity and focus you bring while you're practicing. Finally, our 10th principle gives you a tool for that intensity. Use time boxing to maintain focus. Time boxing means setting a specific, limited amount of time for a practice session and committing to complete focus during that period. You might say, I'm going to practice for 25 minutes with 0 distractions. The time limit creates helpful pressure that keeps you engaged. It's easier to maintain focus when you know it's just for a defined period, and the constraint forces you to be efficient, to get right to the work without procrastinating. You can use techniques like the Pomodoro method, which uses 25-minute blocks, or create your own intervals. The key is the commitment to focus for that bounded time. Your phone is away, notifications are off, and you're fully present with the skill you're developing. These focused bursts of practice, day after day, compound into remarkable growth. These 10 principles show you that effective practice isn't about grinding for hours. It's about smart design. Practice at your edge, isolate weaknesses, attempt harder tasks, fix yesterday's mistakes, match practice to performance, get quick feedback, use real problems, add variations, keep sessions short and intense, and box your time. With these approaches, every practice session becomes a powerful engine of improvement. Let these ideas sink in as you relax deeper, knowing that effective practice is within your reach. As you continue to relax, letting your body sink deeper into comfort, we move to our third exploration. This segment is about memory, about learning faster and forgetting less. Memory is the foundation of all learning, and understanding how it works changes everything. Let's begin with a counterintuitive truth. Space your study sessions instead of cramming. Your brain doesn't work like a hard drive where you can upload information all at once. It works more like a garden where things need time to take root. When you cram, trying to learn everything in one long session, you get the illusion of learning. The information feels familiar during that session, but it doesn't transfer to long-term memory effectively. What works far better is spacing. Study something today, come back to it tomorrow, review it again 3 days later, then a week later, then a month later. These spaced encounters force your brain to retrieve the information repeatedly, and each retrieval strengthens the memory trace. The spacing creates what feels like forgetting, but that struggle to remember is actually the mechanism that makes memories stick. So instead of studying for 5 hours on Sunday, study for an hour on 5 different days. The total time is the same, but the learning is dramatically better. The second principle embraces something that seems like failure. Let a little forgetting happen because it strengthens memory. This connects directly to spacing. When you review information immediately after learning it, the retrieval is easy, almost effortless. Your brain doesn't have to work hard, so the memory trace doesn't strengthen much. But when you wait long enough that the information starts to fade, just to the edge of forgetting, and then you retrieve it, your brain has to work harder. And that effort, that struggle to remember, is what creates lasting memory. It's called the testing effect or retrieval practice. The harder your brain has to work to retrieve information, the stronger that information becomes. So don't be afraid of forgetting. A little forgetting followed by successful retrieval is one of the most powerful memory tools available to you. Our third principle gives you a practical tool. Use spaced repetition tools, or flashcards. Technology has made sophisticated spaced repetition incredibly accessible. Apps and programs can track every item you're trying to learn and automatically schedule reviews at optimal intervals, showing you items just as you're about to forget them. These systems do the scheduling work for you, ensuring you're always practicing retrieval at the most effective moment. Even simple physical flashcards work beautifully if you organize them into piles based on how well you know them, reviewing difficult cards more frequently than easy ones. The key is that you're not just rereading information. You're actively trying to recall it, testing yourself repeatedly with increasing intervals between tests. This transforms passive study into active memory building. The fourth idea reinforces the pattern. Repeat important ideas over days, not minutes. When you encounter something you need to remember, the natural impulse is to repeat it immediately, over and over. You read a definition 5 times in a row. But this massed repetition is far less effective than distributed repetition. If you need to encounter something 5 times to remember it, don't do all 5 encounters in 5 minutes. Spread them across 5 days or 5 weeks. Each time you come back to it after a delay, you're leveraging that beneficial forgetting we discussed. You're forcing your brain to reconstruct the memory, which strengthens it far more than simply maintaining it through immediate repetition. This requires patience and planning, but the payoff in long-term retention is immense. The fifth principle makes the abstract concrete. Turn key facts into simple question and answer flashcards. The process of converting information into questions forces you to identify what's actually important. And then the act of answering those questions gives you retrieval practice. But make your questions specific and clear. Instead of a vague card that says, "What is photosynthesis?" create a precise question like, "What molecule do plants use to capture light energy during photosynthesis?" The more specific the question, the more precisely you're strengthening the exact memory you need. And keep answers concise. You're building discrete chunks of knowledge that you can recall quickly and accurately. Over time, these individual pieces connect into comprehensive understanding. Our sixth principle is deceptively simple but powerful. Close your notes and try to recall information before rereading it. Most people study by reading their notes over and over, a passive process that creates familiarity but weak memory. Instead, try this. After reading a section or reviewing a topic, close the material and try to write down or speak aloud everything you remember. Don't peek. Struggle with it. You'll likely find gaps, things you can't quite remember. Only after you've exhausted your recall should you open the notes again to check what you missed. This active recall process is far more effective than passive review. It shows you exactly what you know and what you don't, and it strengthens memories through the act of retrieval. Make this your default study method, and your retention will soar. The seventh idea deepens this approach. Self-quiz with explanation-based questions. Don't just test whether you can recall a fact. Test whether you can explain how it works, why it matters, how it connects to other ideas. These deeper questions force you to retrieve not just isolated facts, but the relationships between them, the underlying logic. For example, instead of asking yourself to list the stages of a process, ask yourself to explain why each stage is necessary and what would happen if you skipped one. This kind of questioning builds understanding, not just memory. And it's harder, which means the retrieval is more effortful, which means the learning is stronger. Our eighth principle creates a powerful practice. End each study session with a written summary from memory. After you've studied for a period, before you close your books and walk away, take a few minutes to write a summary of what you learned without looking at your materials. This forces immediate retrieval of the entire session's content. It shows you what stuck and what didn't. It creates connections between ideas as you organize them into coherent summary form. And it gives you a condensed record of the session that you can review later. This single practice, consistently applied, can transform your retention. The act of summarizing from memory is itself a form of learning, not just a review of learning. The 9th principle scales this up. Create cumulative weekly tests for yourself. Don't just review this week's material. Test yourself on everything you've learned in the past week, 2 weeks, month. These cumulative tests force you to maintain and strengthen older memories, not just focus on the newest information. They prevent the common problem where you learn something, move on, and then completely forget it because you never revisit it. By regularly testing yourself on accumulated knowledge, you're using spaced repetition naturally. You're also building connections between older and newer material, seeing how things fit together, deepening your overall understanding. Make these tests challenging, but not overwhelming. The goal is productive retrieval, not frustration. Finally, our 10th principle is one of the most effective learning techniques ever studied. Explain concepts aloud without notes, then check for gaps. This is sometimes called the Feynman technique, named after the physicist Richard Feynman. Here's how it works. Choose a concept you want to understand deeply. Now explain it out loud, as if you're teaching it to someone who knows nothing about it. Use simple language. Create examples. Draw connections. Do this without looking at your materials. Just speak the explanation from your understanding. When you get stuck, when you can't explain something clearly, when you realize you're confused, that's gold. Those are the exact gaps in your understanding. Make note of them. Then go back to your materials, study those specific gaps, and try the explanation again. Repeat until you can explain the entire concept clearly and simply from memory. This technique is powerful because it combines retrieval practice, elaboration, identification of gaps, and targeted review all in one process. These 10 principles about memory aren't just study tips. They're insights into how your brain actually builds lasting knowledge. Space your sessions, embrace forgetting, use spaced repetition tools, repeat over days, create flashcards, practice recall before rereading, quiz yourself deeply, summarize from memory, test cumulatively, and explain aloud. With these approaches, you're not fighting against your memory. You're working with it, leveraging its natural mechanisms to learn faster and forget less. Rest now in this knowledge, letting it settle as you drift deeper into relaxation. Continue breathing slowly, feeling peaceful and at ease. We're moving now into our 4th segment, exploring a fascinating aspect of learning that goes against most people's instincts. This is about interleaving and variation, about why mixing beats repeating. Our first principle introduces the core concept. Interleave related topics instead of studying one topic at a time. Most people learn by blocking. They spend an hour on topic A, then an hour on topic B, then an hour on topic C. It feels organized and logical, but research shows that mixing these topics together, switching between them during a single study session, produces better long-term learning. This is called interleaving. Instead of doing 20 practice problems of one type, you mix different types of problems. Instead of studying all of Chapter 3 and then all of Chapter 4, you switch back and forth between their concepts. Why does this work? Because interleaving forces your brain to discriminate between different kinds of problems and choose the right approach each time. You can't rely on the momentum of repetition. You have to think freshly about each item. This creates stronger, more flexible memories. Yes, it feels harder during practice. Yes, your performance might seem worse in the moment. But your long-term retention and ability to apply knowledge in mixed contexts improves dramatically. The second principle applies this to problem solving. Mix problem types randomly instead of doing all problems of one type together. When you do 10 similar problems in a row, you're not really solving them independently. You're reusing the same mental process 10 times. The first problem requires thinking. The next 9 are mostly repetition. But when problems are mixed randomly, each one requires you to figure out what type of problem it is and which approach to use. This is more cognitively demanding, but it's also more realistic. In real life, problems don't come organized by type. They come mixed together, and you need to diagnose each one. By practicing this way, you're preparing for reality. You're also building much stronger mental categories because you're constantly practicing the discrimination between them. So shuffle your practice problems. Embrace the confusion. It's productive confusion. Our third idea extends interleaving across time. Mix old and new material in every study session. Don't fall into the trap of only studying the newest chapter, the most recent lesson. Each time you sit down to study, include some review of older material along with learning new content. This serves multiple purposes. It provides spaced repetition for older material, preventing you from forgetting what you learned weeks ago. It helps you see connections between old and new ideas. And it gives you variety within each session, which maintains engagement and builds more flexible understanding. You might spend 60% of your time on new material and 40% on review, adjusting the ratio based on your needs. The key is that every session includes both. The fourth principle is about structure. Occasionally do mixed bag sessions where you randomly combine everything you're learning. Most of your study might be somewhat organized, focusing on related topics. But periodically, perhaps once a week, do a completely mixed practice session. Pull practice problems, flashcards, or review questions from all your different topics and shuffle them together randomly. Work through them without any organizing theme beyond the random mixture. These sessions feel chaotic and can be frustrating, but they're incredibly valuable. They force your brain to maintain all your knowledge simultaneously, ready to access whatever is needed. They reveal which concepts you truly understand and which you only understand in their familiar context. And they prepare you for comprehensive tests or real-world application where everything you know might be relevant. Our fifth principle adds another dimension of variation. Vary your practice conditions, including location, time of day, and specific examples. There's a phenomenon called context-dependent memory. You remember things better in the same context where you learn them. This can be a problem if you always study in the same chair at the same time with the same examples. Your memory becomes tied to that context. But if you vary these conditions, studying sometimes in the library, sometimes at home, sometimes in a cafe, using different examples each time, your memory becomes more robust and independent of context. The knowledge becomes more flexible, more reliably accessible in any situation. So intentionally rotate where and when you study. Use different examples to illustrate the same concept. This variation might feel less comfortable, but it builds stronger, more transferable learning. The sixth principle applies this to a common tool. Shuffle your flashcards to avoid order dependence. If you always review flashcards in the same order, you start to rely on sequence cues. You remember that this card comes after that one, or that this answer is near the beginning of your deck. But you don't actually strengthen the direct connection between the question and answer. By shuffling your deck each time you review, you eliminate these false cues. Each card stands alone, and you have to retrieve the answer from real memory rather than position. This makes review sessions more challenging, but far more effective. Digital flashcard apps often do this automatically, which is one of their advantages. Our seventh idea is about conceptual mixing. Alternate between theory and application in your practice. Don't spend all your time on abstract concepts or all your time on practical problems. Go back and forth. Study a principle, apply it to a problem. Work on practical exercises, then step back to understand the underlying theory. This alternation helps you see how theory explains practice and how practice illustrates theory. It builds bidirectional connections in your knowledge, and it prevents you from becoming either a theorist who can't apply knowledge or a practitioner who doesn't understand why things work. The combination of both, interleaved together, creates the deepest understanding. The eighth principle thinks about weekly structure. Combine multiple practice formats in a week. Maybe Monday, you work on problem sets. Wednesday, you review flashcards and read new material. Friday, you do a teaching-style explanation session and take a practice test. By varying the format of your practice across the week, you approach the material from multiple angles. Each format strengthens different aspects of your understanding. Problem sets build application skills. Flashcards build quick recall. Reading builds conceptual knowledge. Teaching builds deep understanding. Testing reveals gaps. Together, they create comprehensive, robust learning. So don't get stuck in just one study method. Rotate through several throughout your week. Our ninth principle applies to skill development. Rotate between complementary subskills, rather than mastering one completely before moving to the next. If you're learning a musical instrument, you might spend some time on technical exercises, then switch to learning a song, then work on music theory, then practice improvisation, all in one practice session or across a few days. These subskills support each other, and working on one often provides insight into another. You're also maintaining multiple areas of development simultaneously, rather than letting some areas stagnate while you focus entirely on one. This rotation keeps practice interesting and builds a more balanced, integrated skill set. Finally, our 10th principle varies your mode of engagement. Practice recalling and expressing information through speaking, writing, and drawing. Your brain processes and stores information differently depending on how you engage with it. When you only read and think about material, you're using one set of neural pathways. But when you also speak it aloud, you're adding auditory and motor components. When you write it, you're adding different motor patterns and visual processing. When you draw diagrams or concept maps, you're engaging spatial reasoning. By rotating through these different modes, you're building multiple pathways to the same information. This makes the memory richer, more accessible from more mental starting points. So don't just think about what you're learning. Say it, write it, draw it, and see it from all these angles. These 10 principles about interleaving and variation show you that effective learning isn't about straight lines and perfect organization. It's about productive mixing, about creating complexity that makes your brain work harder in ways that pay off tremendously. Interleave topics, mix problem types, combine old and new, do mixed bag sessions, vary conditions, shuffle flashcards, alternate theory and practice, combine formats, rotate subskills, and use multiple modes. This approach feels messier and harder in the moment, but it builds learning that lasts and transfers. Let this understanding settle into your mind as you relax even deeper. Rest comfortably as we enter our 5th segment together. You're doing beautifully, absorbing these ideas effortlessly. Now we turn to deep understanding, to learning that doesn't just sit in your memory, but actually transfers to new situations and problems. Let's begin with one of the most powerful learning techniques ever discovered. Use the Feynman technique to explain concepts simply. Richard Feynman was a brilliant physicist who believed that if you truly understood something, you could explain it in simple terms that anyone could grasp. The technique named after him works like this. Take a concept you want to understand deeply. Now imagine you're explaining it to someone with no background in the subject, perhaps a child. Explain it out loud or in writing using the simplest possible language. No jargon. No technical terms unless you define them clearly. Just pure, simple explanation. When you try this, something remarkable happens. You immediately discover where your understanding is fuzzy. The places where you rely on memorized phrases instead of true comprehension become obvious. Those are your gaps. Go back, study those specific areas, and try explaining again. Keep iterating until your explanation is clear, accurate, and simple. This process transforms surface learning into deep understanding. Our second principle encourages curiosity. Ask why and how repeatedly until the logic is completely clear. Don't accept information passively. When you encounter a fact, formula, or concept, ask why it's true. When you get an answer, ask why that's true. Keep asking why, drilling down through layers of explanation until you reach fundamental principles, or until you truly understand the causal chain. The same works with how. How does this process work? How does this step lead to the next? How would this change if conditions were different? This persistent questioning might feel tedious, but it's building something crucial. You're constructing a logical network of understanding where each piece connects to others through clear reasoning. This kind of understanding is flexible and transferable because you know not just what is true, but why it's true and how it works. The third principle helps you see the forest through the trees. Identify the big idea of each topic you study. Every subject, every chapter, every lesson has one or a few central ideas that everything else supports or derives from. But often these big ideas get buried in details. Before you dive into the specifics, or after you've studied them, step back and ask yourself what the core concept is. What is this really about? What's the main point? Being able to articulate the big idea gives you a mental anchor. All the details then hang on this central framework rather than floating disconnected in your mind. It also helps you see how different topics relate to each other, because you can compare their big ideas. This high-level understanding prevents you from getting lost in details, while ensuring you can always zoom back out to see the bigger picture. Our fourth idea leverages your existing knowledge. Connect new ideas to what you already know. Your brain is not a blank slate. It's full of knowledge, experiences, and mental models. The fastest way to learn something new is to connect it to something you already understand. When you encounter a new concept, actively search for analogies, similarities, or relationships to familiar ideas. This might mean connecting a new physics concept to everyday experiences, or linking a new programming pattern to one you already know, or relating historical events to current situations. These connections do two things. They give you immediate intuition about the new concept because you can leverage your existing understanding. And they strengthen both the new and old knowledge because they're now linked together in a mutually reinforcing network. The fifth principle makes abstract concepts tangible. Turn rules and formulas into stories or scenarios. Abstract information is hard to remember and understand, but stories and concrete scenarios are natural for human brains. We've evolved to remember narratives and situations. So when you're learning something abstract, deliberately convert it into a story. Create a scenario where the concept plays out. Personify the elements. Make it visual and emotional. For example, if you're learning about supply and demand in economics, don't just memorize the curves. Imagine a specific marketplace with specific people making decisions, and walk through what happens when demand increases or supply decreases. This narrative encoding makes the concept memorable and intuitive. The story becomes a retrieval structure for the abstract knowledge. Our sixth principle turns you into an active creator. Create your own examples after learning a method or concept. Most learning materials give you examples, and that's helpful. But creating your own examples is far more powerful. It requires you to understand the concept deeply enough to recognize where it applies. It forces you to manipulate the concept actively rather than passively receiving it. And it builds personal meaning because these are your examples, drawn from your interests and experience. So after learning something, close the book and generate 3 examples of your own. Make them diverse. Make them interesting to you. This act of creation is itself a form of testing, revealing whether you truly understand. And the examples you create become powerful memory anchors. The seventh idea gives structure to complexity. Build simple mind maps that link ideas together. Mind maps are visual diagrams that show how concepts relate to each other. Start with a central idea in the middle. Branch out to related concepts. Show connections between branches. Use colors, images, or symbols to make it visually rich. The process of creating a mind map forces you to think about relationships, hierarchies, and connections. It externalizes the structure of your understanding, and the visual format makes it easier to see patterns and remember the whole network of ideas. You don't need artistic skill or perfect organization. Even rough, simple mind maps are valuable tools for organizing and deepening understanding. They're particularly useful when learning systems with many interconnected parts. Our eighth principal practice is compression. Summarize a chapter in 5 bullets, then compress those 5 bullets into one sentence. This is an exercise in identifying what's truly essential. First, you read and understand a chapter or section. Then you distill it down to 5 bullet points, capturing the key ideas. Then comes the harder part. Compress those 5 points into a single sentence that captures the essence. This multiple-level summarization forces you to distinguish between core concepts and supporting details. It makes you think about how ideas relate to each other and what unifies them. And it gives you both a detailed summary and an ultra-compressed version that you can use as a memory anchor. Practice this technique regularly, and your ability to extract and articulate essential ideas will grow dramatically. The ninth principle connects learning to meaning. Keep a note for each topic explaining why it matters. It's easy to learn facts and procedures mechanically without ever really understanding their significance. But when you explicitly articulate why something matters, how it's useful, what problems it solves, or what questions it answers, you're giving your brain a reason to care about the information. This isn't just motivational, it's structural. Understanding significance helps you build better mental categories and stronger memory. So for each new topic, write a brief note. Why does this concept exist? What problem does it solve? When would I use this? How does it matter in the real world? These answers provide context that makes the learning stick. Finally, our 10th principle is perhaps the most powerful of all. Teach the concept to a friend or an imaginary class. Teaching is the ultimate test and reinforcement of understanding. When you teach something, you have to organize it logically. You have to explain it clearly. You have to anticipate questions and confusion. You have to understand it well enough to present it multiple ways. All of this deepens your own understanding dramatically. You don't need an actual student. Explain the concept out loud to an imaginary audience, or write it as if creating a lesson. Pay attention to where you struggle. Those struggles reveal gaps in your understanding. Return to those areas, clarify them, and teach again. This cycle of teaching, discovering gaps, learning more, and teaching again is one of the most effective learning processes available. It's why people say the best way to learn something is to teach it. These 10 principles about deep understanding reveal that learning isn't about accumulating isolated facts. It's about building rich, interconnected networks of meaning. Use the Feynman technique. Ask why and how persistently. Identify big ideas. Connect to existing knowledge. Create stories. Generate examples. Build mind maps. Practice compression. Articulate significance, and teach others. With these approaches, you're not just learning. You're understanding deeply in ways that last and transfer to new situations. Let these ideas integrate into your mind as you sink deeper into restful peace. Breathe easily and deeply as we move into our 6th segment. You're relaxed and open, absorbing these insights naturally. Now we explore memory techniques, the strategies that experts use to encode information efficiently and reliably. Our first principle addresses how your brain handles information. Chunk information to reduce cognitive load. Your working memory, the mental workspace where you process information, can only hold a limited number of items at once, usually around 4 to 7. But here's the key. You can expand this capacity by chunking, grouping individual pieces of information into meaningful units. A phone number isn't 10 separate digits. It's 3 chunks: area code, prefix, and line number. A chess master doesn't see 32 individual pieces. They see meaningful patterns and configurations. When you're learning, look for ways to group related information into chunks. Create categories. Find patterns. Group by similarity, by function, by sequence. Each chunk then occupies one slot in your working memory, while containing multiple pieces of information. This lets you work with more complexity without overwhelming your mental capacity. It also makes information easier to remember because the chunks have internal structure and meaning. The second principle gives you a classic tool. Use mnemonics for lists and sequences. A mnemonic is any device that helps you remember information. The most common type takes the first letter of each item in a list and creates a memorable word or sentence. Medical students use mnemonics to remember anatomy. Music students use them to remember notes. You can create them for anything you need to memorize in sequence. The stranger, funnier, or more vivid the mnemonic, the better it works. Your brain remembers unusual things more easily than ordinary ones. So don't make boring mnemonics. Make them memorable, personal, even ridiculous. The mnemonic becomes a retrieval structure. When you recall the word or sentence, it triggers recall of the full list. It's a small investment that pays lasting dividends in accurate, ordered recall. Our third idea leverages your brain's strengths. Create vivid visual images to link ideas together. Your brain is extraordinarily good at remembering images, especially unusual or emotionally charged ones. You can exploit this by converting abstract information into concrete, vivid mental images. Need to remember that a particular historical event happened in a particular year? Create an absurd image linking symbols of the event with symbols of the year. Need to remember a person's name? Transform their name into a vivid image and link it to something distinctive about their appearance. The more unusual, exaggerated, or emotionally charged the image, the more memorable it becomes. This technique requires creativity and practice, but it's remarkably effective. You're translating information from a format that's hard for your brain to retain into one that's natural and easy. The fourth principle introduces a powerful classical technique. Use the memory palace method for ordered information. This technique, also called the method of loci, has been used for thousands of years. Here's how it works. Imagine a familiar location, perhaps your home, in vivid detail. Now mentally walk through this location, following a consistent path. As you walk, place the items you want to remember at specific locations along the path. Make each placement vivid and unusual. A giant book on your front step. A glowing equation floating above your couch. A historical figure sitting at your kitchen table. To recall the information, simply take the same mental walk and observe what you placed at each location. The spatial structure and the visual vividness combine to create exceptionally strong memories. This technique can be used for speeches, lists, concepts, anything you need to recall in order. Your brain's spatial memory is ancient and powerful, and the memory palace leverages it directly. Our fifth idea makes the abstract concrete. Associate abstract ideas with concrete examples. Abstract concepts are inherently difficult to remember because they don't engage your senses directly. But concrete examples are tangible, visual, and memorable. So for every abstract principle, formula, or concept you learn, immediately attach a concrete example to it. This example becomes the anchor for the abstraction. When you need to recall the abstract idea, you first recall the concrete example, and it leads you back to the principle. Over time, multiple examples can cluster around a single abstract idea, each one reinforcing it from a different angle. This habit of always pairing abstract with concrete builds a more robust and accessible knowledge base. The sixth principle combines modalities. Use dual coding by pairing words with visuals. Information that's encoded both verbally and visually is remembered much better than information encoded in only one way. This is called dual coding theory. When you learn something, don't just read words or listen to verbal explanations. Also look at diagrams, charts, illustrations, or create your own visual representations. The combination of linguistic and visual encoding creates two separate memory traces that reinforce each other. If you forget one, the other might still be accessible, and often, accessing one helps retrieve the other. So whenever possible, supplement verbal learning with visual learning and vice versa. Draw diagrams of concepts. Look at images related to what you're reading. This multisensory encoding dramatically improves retention. Our seventh principle engages another modality. Say key definitions and concepts out loud. There's something powerful about speaking information. It adds an auditory component to your memory. It engages motor systems in forming the words. It often helps you hear whether an explanation makes sense. When you're studying, don't just read silently. Speak important ideas aloud. Recite definitions. Explain concepts to yourself verbally. This might feel awkward at first, especially if you're in a public space, but even quiet mumbling helps. The act of producing the language yourself, of hearing it in your own voice, creates a richer encoding than passive reading alone. This is one reason why reading aloud to children is so effective for their learning. They're not just seeing words, they're hearing them, connecting sound to meaning. The eighth idea uses linguistic connections. Link new terms to familiar sounding words, even if the connection is arbitrary or silly. When you encounter a new vocabulary word, technical term, or name, your brain has no existing hook to hang it on. But you can create an artificial hook by noticing any similarity to words you already know. The similarity might be in sound, spelling, or even just a few letters. Then create a vivid image or story connecting the meaning of the new term to the familiar word. This is especially useful for foreign language learning, but works for any new terminology. The connection is a memory bridge from known to unknown. It might seem artificial or forced, and that's fine. What matters is that it works, that it gives your brain a retrieval path. Our ninth principle transforms passive into active. Turn paragraphs and passages into questions. When you're reading to learn, don't just highlight or underline passively. Stop periodically and convert what you've read into questions. What is the main point here? How does this work? Why is this important? What's an example of this? By reformulating information as questions, you're doing several things. You're identifying what's important. You're creating test items you can use for later review. And you're priming your brain to encode the information in question-answer format, which is often how you'll need to retrieve it. This active processing during reading dramatically improves comprehension and retention compared to passive reading. Finally, our 10th principle brings us full circle. Reinforce all learning with spaced repetition. We've mentioned this before because it's fundamental. No matter what encoding techniques you use, no matter how well you understand something initially, memory fades without reinforcement. Spaced repetition is the systematic review of information at increasing intervals. You might review something after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. Each review strengthens the memory and extends how long it will last. You can implement this manually with flashcards or use software that does it automatically. But the principle is simple and universal. Learning isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of encoding, forgetting a little, retrieving, strengthening, and repeating. Embrace this cycle, and your knowledge becomes permanent. These 10 memory techniques, show you that remembering isn't about having a good or bad memory. It's about using techniques that align with how memory actually works. Chunk information, use mnemonics, create visual images, build memory palaces, link abstract to concrete, combine words and visuals, speak aloud, connect to familiar words, turn text into questions, and use spaced repetition. With these tools, you can encode information efficiently and reliably, building a knowledge base that serves you for life. Rest in this knowledge as you continue to relax deeply. Let yourself sink even deeper into comfort as we enter our 7th segment. Your breathing is slow and easy. Your mind is calm and receptive. Now we explore reading, note-taking, and how to process information quickly without losing understanding. Let's begin with a fascinating finding about how you take notes. Take handwritten notes to improve retention. In our digital age, it's tempting to type everything. Typing is faster, neater, and easier to organize. But research consistently shows that handwriting notes leads to better learning and retention than typing them. Why? When you type, you can transcribe nearly verbatim without much processing. But when you write by hand, you're slower. This forces you to be selective, to summarize, to paraphrase. You can't capture everything word for word, so you have to think about what's important and how to express it concisely. This processing, this mental transformation of information as you write it, is itself a powerful learning act. Your brain engages more deeply with handwritten notes. So whenever possible, especially for learning rather than just recording, reach for a pen and paper. The slight inconvenience pays off in much better comprehension and memory. Our second principle is about structure. Use active note formats that include questions, cues, and summaries. Don't just write down facts in a stream. Use formats that promote active engagement. One popular system is the Cornell method, where you divide your page into sections. Notes on the right, key questions or cues on the left, and a summary at the bottom. As you take notes, you're constantly thinking about what questions this information answers, what the key terms and concepts are, and how to summarize it concisely. This structured approach transforms note-taking from passive transcription to active learning. Even if you don't use a formal system, incorporate these elements. Write questions in the margins. Create section summaries. Flag key concepts. Your notes become a study tool, not just a record. The third idea is about restraint. Mark only essential points rather than highlighting everything. Many people highlight or underline extensively, ending up with pages that are more marked than unmarked. This defeats the purpose. Highlighting should make important information stand out, but if everything is highlighted, nothing stands out. Be selective and strategic. Read a paragraph or section first. Then go back and mark only the genuinely key points, the ideas or facts that capture the essence. This requires you to evaluate importance, which is itself a learning process. And it leaves you with notes where the essential information is immediately visible, making review much more efficient. Less is more when it comes to marking your texts. Our fourth principle promotes refinement. Rewrite your notes into shorter, more condensed versions. After a lecture, reading, or study session, don't just file your notes away. Spend time reviewing them and rewriting them more concisely. This second pass forces you to process the information again, to decide what's really important, to see connections you missed the first time. You're essentially creating a study guide as you go. Some people make these condensed notes immediately after the original session. Others wait a day or two, which adds the benefit of spaced repetition. Either way, this rewriting is a powerful learning activity, and the condensed notes become your primary review material, more focused and useful than your original notes. The fifth idea is about active reading. Turn headings and subheadings into questions before reading each section. Most textbooks and articles are organized with descriptive headings. Don't just skim past them. Pause at each heading and convert it into a question. If the heading is Causes of the Industrial Revolution, turn it into What caused the Industrial Revolution? Then read the section with that question in mind, actively seeking the answer. This simple technique transforms passive reading into active inquiry. You're reading with purpose, with a specific question driving your attention. It improves comprehension and retention because you're engaging with the material intentionally rather than just letting your eyes pass over words. Our sixth principle creates mindful breaks in reading. Pause after each page or section to summarize mentally what you just read. Don't just read continuously from start to finish. Build in brief pauses for mental processing. After a page, after a section, stop and ask yourself what you just read. Summarize it in your own words in your mind. What were the main points? How does this connect to what came before? Can you explain it simply? This pause gives your brain time to consolidate the information. It also immediately reveals whether you actually understood and retained what you read or just passed your eyes over the words. If you can't summarize it, you know you need to reread more carefully. These brief mental summaries throughout your reading dramatically improve overall comprehension and retention. The seventh idea is simple but effective. Use a finger or pointer while reading to maintain focus and pace. This might seem elementary, but it works. When you use your finger to track along the lines as you read, several things happen. Your eyes have a clear point to follow, reducing wandering and distraction. You maintain a more consistent pace, and you're adding a subtle kinesthetic element to the reading process. This is especially useful when reading dense or difficult material where your attention tends to drift. The physical act of pointing and moving engages you slightly more actively with the text. Many speed reading techniques incorporate this because it helps maintain focus and rhythm. Don't dismiss it as childish. It's a practical tool for maintaining reading concentration. Our eighth principle is about controlled challenge. Occasionally read faster than feels comfortable to build speed and flexibility. Most people read at a comfortable pace that they've settled into over years. But your reading speed isn't fixed. It's a skill you can develop. One way to develop it is through occasional speed reading practice. Choose material that's not too difficult, set a timer, and deliberately read faster than you normally would. You might use your finger to pace yourself, moving it down the page more quickly than usual and forcing your eyes to keep up. At first, comprehension will drop, and that's okay. You're training your brain to process text more quickly. Over time, with practice, your comfortable reading speed will increase, and your comprehension at higher speeds will improve. Don't always read this way, but regular speed practice can significantly improve your overall reading efficiency. The ninth idea addresses a reading habit. Avoid subvocalizing, that is, silently pronouncing words in your mind when skimming for information. Subvocalization is the tendency to hear each word in your mind as you read, as if you're silently speaking it. This limits your reading speed to roughly your speaking speed. For careful, deep reading, subvocalization is fine and even helpful. But when you're skimming for specific information or trying to read faster, it's a constraint. You can train yourself to reduce subvocalization by consciously focusing on seeing and understanding words without hearing them. This takes practice and doesn't work for all material or purposes. But for situations where you need to process large amounts of text quickly, reducing subvocalization can dramatically increase your speed while maintaining adequate comprehension for your purpose. Finally, our 10th principle is about environmental control. Keep reading sessions distraction-free to maintain focus and comprehension. This seems obvious, but is often violated. Every distraction, every interruption, breaks your concentration and forces your brain to rebuild context when you return to reading. Turn off notifications. Put your phone in another room. Use website blockers if you're reading on a computer. Choose quiet environments when possible, or use noise-canceling headphones with neutral sound. Close unnecessary browser tabs. Clear your reading space of visual distractions. These environmental controls might seem minor, but their cumulative effect on your reading comprehension and efficiency is substantial. Deep reading requires sustained attention, and sustained attention requires a supportive environment. Create those conditions deliberately. These 10 principles about reading and note-taking reveal that how you engage with information matters as much as how much time you spend. Handwrite notes, use active formats, mark selectively, rewrite concisely, turn headings into questions, pause to summarize, use a pointer, practice speed, reduce subvocalization when appropriate, and eliminate distractions. With these approaches, you're not just reading words or taking notes. You're actively processing and learning, building understanding with every page. Let these strategies settle into your awareness as you rest peacefully. Continue breathing softly, feeling completely at ease as we move into our 8th segment. Your body is relaxed, your mind is calm, and you're absorbing these ideas effortlessly. Now we turn to the foundation beneath all learning: your environment, your energy, and your focus. Let's begin with your physical space. Study in a quiet, dedicated space whenever possible. Your environment shapes your learning more than you might realize. When you study in a consistent, dedicated space, your brain begins to associate that environment with focused learning. The space itself becomes a cue that it's time to concentrate. Ideally, this space is quiet, free from foot traffic, and used primarily for studying rather than for relaxation or entertainment. This doesn't mean you need a perfect home office. It might be a corner of a room, a spot at the library, or a particular cafe table. What matters is consistency and association. Your brain learns to enter a focused state more easily when you're in your designated learning space. And the quiet minimizes external distractions, allowing your attention to remain on the material you're learning. The second principle is simple but powerful. Keep your phone out of reach and out of sight. Your phone is probably the single greatest threat to sustained focus. Even when it's silent, even when you're not actively checking it, its mere presence in your visual field reduces your cognitive capacity. Research shows that having your phone within sight, even face down, measurably decreases performance on attention-demanding tasks. The part of your brain that monitors for notifications and messages is constantly working, stealing resources from learning. The solution is straightforward. Before you begin studying, put your phone in another room, in a drawer, in your bag across the room, anywhere you can't see it and can't easily reach it without getting up. This single change can dramatically improve your focus and learning efficiency. You'll notice how much more present you are with the material. Our third idea is about preparation. Prepare all your materials before starting your study session. There's a phenomenon called decision fatigue. Every small decision you make depletes your mental energy slightly. When you sit down to study and then have to get up to find a notebook, then realize you need a different textbook, then remember you wanted to print something, you're fragmenting your focus and wasting mental energy on logistics. Instead, gather everything you need before you begin. Books, notes, pens, water, any resources you'll use. Check that you have the right materials for the specific topics you're studying. This preparation phase happens when you're not yet in deep focus, so it doesn't disrupt your learning state. Then, once you begin, you can maintain unbroken concentration because everything you need is already at hand. The fourth principle addresses sound environment. Use noise-blocking headphones or neutral sounds if needed, but be strategic. Some people study best in complete silence. Others find that some background sound helps mask distracting noises or provides gentle stimulation that aids focus. If you're in an environment where quiet isn't possible, Noise-canceling headphones can create a bubble of calm. Some people benefit from white noise, nature sounds, or instrumental music without lyrics. The key is that the sound should be neutral and consistent, not attention-grabbing. Avoid music with lyrics when reading or working with language, as the linguistic processing interferes. Experiment to find what works best for you, but be honest with yourself. Sometimes what feels good, like listening to favorite songs, actually reduces learning efficiency, even though it's more enjoyable. Our fifth idea is about timing. Study when your energy is naturally high. Everyone has daily rhythms of alertness and fatigue. Some people are sharpest in the morning, others peak in the afternoon or evening. Your optimal learning time is when your mental energy is high, not when it's convenient or when you usually study. For important or difficult material, schedule study sessions during your peak hours. Save easier, more routine tasks for your lower energy times. This might require experimentation to identify your peak periods. Notice when you feel most alert, when concentration comes most easily, when complex thinking feels manageable rather than exhausting. Then protect those times for your most important learning. This alignment of task difficulty with energy level can double your learning efficiency. The sixth principle prevents burnout. Take short breaks to avoid mental fatigue. Your brain's ability to maintain focus is limited. After a period of concentration, usually somewhere between 25 to 90 minutes, depending on the difficulty of the material and your experience, your attention begins to fade, your error rate increases, and your learning efficiency drops. Rather than pushing through this fatigue, take a brief break. Stand up, move around, look at something distant to rest your eyes, get water, step outside for fresh air. 5 to 10 minutes is often enough. These breaks aren't wasted time. They're essential maintenance for sustained learning. The break allows mental recovery so that when you return, you're fresh and focused again. Many productive learners use structured break systems like the Pomodoro technique, with regular intervals of work and rest. Find a rhythm that keeps your focus sharp throughout your study session. Our seventh principle is fundamental. Get enough sleep because memory consolidates during sleep. This isn't just about being alert during study. Sleep is when your brain processes and integrates what you learned during the day. During certain sleep stages, your brain replays and strengthens the neural patterns associated with your learning. It moves information from short-term to long-term memory. It makes connections between new and existing knowledge. When you're sleep-deprived, all of these processes are impaired. You'll struggle to focus during study, and even if you manage to learn something, it won't stick as well. Prioritizing 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep isn't a luxury. It's an essential part of effective learning. The hours you sacrifice sleep to study more are often counterproductive. Better to study less with adequate sleep than study more while sleep-deprived. The eighth idea recognizes the mind-body connection. Exercise regularly to boost brain health and learning capacity. Physical exercise isn't just good for your body, it's profoundly beneficial for your brain. Exercise increases blood flow to the brain, promotes the growth of new neurons, enhances the connections between existing neurons, and improves mood and stress management. Regular exercise, even just 30 minutes of moderate activity most days, can improve memory, attention, and learning capacity. The effects are both immediate and long-term. A walk before studying can boost your focus for the session ahead. Regular exercise over weeks and months builds a more capable brain. You don't need to become an athlete. Simple, consistent movement, whether it's walking, cycling, swimming, or any activity you enjoy, is enough to gain these cognitive benefits. Our ninth principle is about fuel. Eat well and stay hydrated because your brain needs proper nutrition. Your brain is an energy-intensive organ, using a disproportionate amount of your body's resources. It needs steady glucose, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals to function optimally. Skipping meals, eating primarily processed foods high in sugar, or studying while dehydrated all impair cognitive function. You don't need a perfect diet, but some basic principles help. Eat regular meals with protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. Avoid large amounts of simple sugars that cause energy crashes. Drink enough water throughout the day. Even mild dehydration reduces cognitive performance. Keep water with you while studying. These nutritional basics create the biochemical foundation for effective learning. Your brain can only work as well as the fuel you provide it. Finally, our 10th principle offers a mental reset tool. Use brief mindfulness or breathing exercises to center yourself before and during study. Before you begin studying, spend just 2 or 3 minutes sitting quietly, breathing slowly and deeply, and letting your mind settle. This brief practice shifts your nervous system from scattered or stressed to calm and focused. It's like rebooting your attention. You can also use this during study breaks to reset. Simple practices work well. Count 10 slow breaths. Do a body scan, noticing tension and releasing it. Focus on the feeling of your breath entering and leaving. These aren't elaborate meditation sessions. They're brief attention training exercises that prepare your mind for focused work. Over time, regular practice makes it easier to access focused states quickly. You're training your attention like a muscle. These 10 principles about environment, energy, and focus remind you that learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a body, in an environment, embedded in your daily rhythms and habits. Study in dedicated spaces, remove your phone, prepare materials, manage sound, align with your energy peaks, take breaks, prioritize sleep, exercise regularly, fuel your brain properly, and use mindfulness to center yourself. These aren't peripheral concerns. They're the foundation that makes all your learning strategies effective. With these elements in place, your capacity to learn expands naturally. Rest in this understanding as your mind and body continue to relax deeply. Relax even more deeply now as we enter our 9th segment together. You're peaceful, open, and receptive. These ideas are settling into your mind naturally, without effort. Now we explore the social dimension of learning, how working with others can accelerate your progress dramatically. Let's begin with the power of community. Learn with peers or accountability partners who share your goals. Learning in isolation can work, but learning with others who are on a similar journey adds multiple benefits. First, there's accountability. When someone else knows your goals and expects you to show up and make progress, you're more likely to follow through. Second, there's shared motivation. Seeing others work hard inspires you. Celebrating small wins together sustains enthusiasm. Third, there's perspective. Different people struggle with different things, understand things in different ways, and can offer explanations or insights that resonate when the textbook's explanation didn't. Whether it's a study group, a learning partner, or an online community, having others on the journey with you makes the path easier and more enjoyable. Choose your learning companions thoughtfully. Seek people who are serious about learning, who encourage rather than distract, and who are at roughly your level or slightly beyond. The second principle is about improvement through feedback. Seek fast, specific feedback on your performance. Feedback is essential for learning, but not all feedback is equally useful. The most valuable feedback is fast, so you can adjust quickly while the experience is fresh. And it's specific, telling you exactly what you did well and what needs improvement, not just good job or needs work. This kind of feedback can come from teachers, coaches, or mentors. It can come from peers who are evaluating your work against clear criteria. It can even come from self-assessment when you have good rubrics or examples to compare against. The key is to actively seek feedback rather than waiting for it to appear. After you complete a practice attempt, a project, or an assignment, ask for detailed feedback. What specifically was strong? What specifically needs improvement? How can I make that improvement? This information is gold. It tells you exactly where to focus your practice. Our third idea invites challenge. Ask others to question and challenge your understanding. When you explain something to a friend and they nod and say, "That makes sense," you feel good, but you might not learn much. But when they ask probing questions, point out unclear parts, or challenge your reasoning, that's when your understanding deepens. You have to clarify your thinking. You have to fill in gaps. You have to see your own assumptions and test whether they're valid. So explicitly invite this kind of challenge. Ask study partners to question your explanations. Request that mentors poke holes in your reasoning. Create an environment where being wrong or uncertain is seen as an opportunity to learn rather than a failure. This kind of intellectual challenge, done supportively, accelerates learning by revealing and addressing weaknesses in understanding. The fourth principle suggests learning through observation. Watch experts perform the skill, then imitate what you observed. One of the most powerful ways humans learn is through imitation. Before you practice extensively on your own, spend time watching people who are skilled at what you're trying to learn. Watch carefully. Notice not just what they do, but how they do it. The sequence, the timing, the subtle details. Ask them to slow down or explain their process. Then try to replicate what you saw. Your first attempts won't match the expert, and that's expected. But you're building a mental model of skilled performance that guides your practice. This observational learning is why apprenticeships work, why watching tutorials is helpful, why studying great examples in any field accelerates your development. You're not copying blindly. You're building your understanding of what excellence looks like. The fifth idea is about environment selection. Join communities where the skill is practiced intensely and excellence is the norm. Your learning is profoundly influenced by the environment and culture around you. If you're trying to learn something in isolation while surrounded by people who don't value it, you're swimming upstream. But if you can immerse yourself, even partially, in a community where everyone is practicing the same skill, where excellence is expected and celebrated, where intense practice is normal, you'll rise to that level naturally. This might mean joining a club, attending workshops, participating in online communities, or finding meetups. In these environments, you're constantly exposed to people who are more skilled, who maintain high standards, who can offer guidance. And the collective energy and norms of the group pull you upward. Environment shapes behavior powerfully, so choose environments that support your learning goals. Our sixth principle leverages a powerful learning method. Teach mini lessons on what you're learning to others. We've mentioned teaching before as a learning tool, But here we emphasize the social aspect. When you commit to teaching something to others, even just a short lesson or explanation, several things happen. First, you have external motivation to truly understand the material, because others are depending on you. Second, you organize information more carefully when preparing to teach than when studying for yourself. Third, the act of teaching, of explaining and answering questions, reveals your understanding gaps immediately. And fourth, teaching is rewarding. It feels good to help others learn. This positive emotion reinforces your own learning. You don't need to be an expert to teach. You can teach what you learned this week to someone learning it now. Teaching beginners when you're intermediate is valuable for both of you. The seventh idea creates public commitment. Share your progress publicly for accountability and motivation. There's something powerful about making your learning journey visible to others. Whether it's posting on social media, maintaining a blog, sharing in a learning community, or just regularly updating friends, public sharing creates accountability. You're more likely to follow through when others can see whether you're making progress. It also creates a record of your journey that you can look back on, seeing how far you've come. And often, sharing attracts support, encouragement, and sometimes helpful advice from unexpected sources. You don't need to share everything, and you don't need a large audience. Even sharing with a small group of friends or fellow learners provides these benefits. The visibility creates a gentle, positive pressure that helps sustain effort over time. The eighth principle suggests playful challenge. Participate in low-stakes challenges and competitions. When learning feels like pure work, motivation can flag. But when there's an element of play, of friendly challenge, learning becomes more engaging. Look for opportunities to test your skills in low-pressure ways. If you're learning a language, participate in conversation exchanges. If you're learning to code, try simple coding challenges or hackathons. If you're learning an instrument, join casual jam sessions. These experiences provide practice in realistic but supportive contexts. The challenge motivates focused effort. The low stakes remove fear of failure, and the social element makes it fun. You also learn by seeing how others approach problems, and you often get informal feedback. These playful challenges keep learning fresh and exciting rather than feeling like endless grinding. Our ninth idea is about guidance. Use mentors and role models who've achieved what you're working toward. Having someone who's already accomplished what you're attempting is invaluable. They've navigated the path before. They know the common pitfalls and efficient routes. They can offer personalized guidance based on observing your specific strengths and weaknesses. A mentor doesn't need to be a formal arrangement. It might be a teacher, a more experienced colleague, someone in an online community, or even someone whose work you study from a distance. Role models show you what's possible and inspire you to continue when learning gets difficult. Mentors provide direct feedback and advice. Both are tremendously valuable. Don't be afraid to ask for help, to reach out, to request that someone look at your work or answer questions. Most people who are passionate about a skill are happy to help others learn it. Finally, our 10th principle cuts to the chase. Ask others, especially those with more experience, what you should fix first. When you're learning something complex, there are many things you could improve. But not all improvements are equally valuable. Some changes will dramatically improve your performance. Others will yield minimal benefit. People with experience can quickly identify your highest impact areas for improvement. They've seen many learners progress and know which obstacles are fundamental versus peripheral. So don't just ask for general feedback. Ask specifically, what's the one thing I should focus on improving first? Or, if you could only fix one thing about my performance, what would it be? This directed question gets you targeted, actionable guidance that focuses your practice efficiently. Acting on this advice, then coming back for the next priority, creates a path of steady, focused improvement. These 10 principles about learning with others remind you that learning isn't a solitary struggle. It's enhanced by community, by feedback, by challenge, by observation, by the right environments, by teaching, by public sharing, by playful competition, by mentors, and by strategic questions. Find your learning community, seek feedback, invite challenge, watch experts, join communities of practice, teach others, share publicly, compete playfully, seek mentors, and ask what to fix first. With others on the journey, learning becomes not just more effective, but more joyful. Let these insights about social learning settle gently into your awareness as you rest deeply. Breathe slowly and peacefully as we arrive at our final segment. You've absorbed so much wisdom tonight, and now we complete the journey by exploring reflection and long-term growth, the practices that turn temporary learning into lasting mastery. Let's begin with strategic planning. Plan which sub-skills you'll practice each week. Effective learning isn't random. It's intentional and structured. At the start of each week, sit down and identify the specific sub-skills or topics you'll focus on during that week. Maybe this week you're working on a particular technique in your skill, or you're studying a specific chapter, or you're drilling a particular weakness. This planning gives your week direction and purpose. It prevents you from drifting through practice without clear objectives. And it lets you ensure you're spending time on high-impact activities rather than just what's easy or comfortable. Your plan doesn't need to be rigid. Life happens, and adjustments are normal. But having a plan gives you a default path. And even when you deviate, you're making conscious choices rather than just reacting. The second principle creates consistent structure. Review your goals at the start of each practice session. Before you dive into practice, take just a moment to remind yourself what you're trying to accomplish. What's your goal for this session? What are you working toward more broadly? This brief review activates your sense of purpose. It primes your brain to notice progress toward these goals. And it helps you make better decisions during the session about how to use your time. Without this reminder, practice can become mechanical, just going through motions. But when you start with a clear sense of purpose, every action connects to your larger objectives. This takes only a minute, but dramatically increases the intentionality and effectiveness of your practice. Our third idea is one of the most powerful learning tools available. Keep a learning journal where you record insights, observations, and progress. After each study session or practice period, spend a few minutes writing. What did you work on? What went well? What was difficult? What did you learn or realize? What questions do you have? What will you focus on next time? This journal serves multiple purposes. It's a record of your journey that you can look back on to see progress that might not be obvious day to day. It's a thinking tool, because writing about your learning helps you process and understand it better. It's a problem-solving space where you can work through difficulties. And it's a source of insights, because patterns emerge when you review past entries. You might notice that you always struggle at a certain time of day, or that certain approaches work better than others, or that you've actually progressed more than you realized. The journal doesn't need to be elaborate. Simple, consistent entries are far more valuable than occasionally detailed ones. The fourth principle deepens daily learning. After each practice session, write down the single most important lesson from that day. This is a variation on journaling, but with a specific focus. Force yourself to identify the one key insight, the most valuable thing you learned or realized in that session. It might be a technique that clicked, a common error you recognized, a connection between ideas, or a better approach to a problem. By selecting the single most important lesson, you're doing several things. You're reviewing and consolidating your learning. You're practicing prioritization and discernment. And you're creating a condensed record of key insights that you can review periodically. Over weeks and months, these daily lessons accumulate into a powerful knowledge base. They're your personalized, experience-based guide to the skill you're learning. Our fifth idea maintains motivation through visibility. Track your small wins to stay motivated over the long term. Learning is full of small, incremental improvements that are easy to overlook. You don't wake up one day having mastered something. You gradually get better through thousands of small steps. But if you don't notice and celebrate these steps, motivation can fade because progress feels invisible. So deliberately track your wins. Keep a list of things you can do now that you couldn't do a month ago. Notice when something that was hard becomes easy. Celebrate solving a problem that stumped you before. These acknowledgements aren't self-indulgent. They're strategically important for maintaining the motivation that sustains long-term effort. Your brain responds to perceived progress. Give it evidence of progress, and it will sustain your commitment. The sixth principle creates motivating structure. Set milestones with specific dates to give your learning direction. Long-term goals can feel distant and abstract, but milestones break that journey into concrete, achievable steps. A milestone might be completing a course, finishing a project, reaching a certain skill level, or being able to perform a particular task. Attach a target date to each milestone. This creates urgency and helps you pace your effort. You can work backward from the date to determine how much you need to practice each week. And as you reach each milestone, you have a clear achievement to celebrate before moving toward the next one. These milestones aren't rigid deadlines that create stress. They're guideposts that give structure to your journey and create natural moments to pause, assess, and celebrate progress. The seventh idea maintains strategic focus. Periodically reassess which subskills are truly high impact for your goals. Remember the 80-20 principle from our first segment. Some subskills matter far more than others for your particular goals. But which skills are highest impact can change as you progress. What was critical when you were a beginner might be less important now. New priorities might emerge. So every few weeks or months, step back and reassess. Given where you are now and where you want to go, which subskills deserve your focus? Are you still working on the right things, or have you continued old priorities out of habit? This periodic reassessment ensures your practice remains strategically aligned with your evolving goals. You're not just practicing, you're practicing what matters most at this stage of your development. Our eighth principle turns failures into fuel. Extract lessons deliberately from every mistake and setback. Mistakes aren't just inevitable. They're valuable when you learn from them. But learning from mistakes doesn't happen automatically. It requires deliberate reflection. When you make an error, struggle with something, or fail at a task, pause afterward and analyze it. What exactly went wrong? Why did it happen? Was it a gap in knowledge, a flaw in technique, insufficient practice, or something else? What can you learn from this? How will you approach it differently next time? This analysis transforms a simple mistake into a learning opportunity. You're not just failing and moving on. You're extracting maximum value from the failure. Over time, this habit makes you increasingly effective because you're constantly learning from experience rather than just having experience. The ninth idea prevents advancement from undermining fundamentals. Occasionally revisit fundamental skills, even as you advance. As you progress and tackle more advanced aspects of a skill, there's a temptation to leave basics behind. But fundamentals remain important. They're the foundation everything else builds on, and they can deteriorate if completely neglected. So even as you work on advanced material, periodically return to basics. Review fundamental concepts. Practice basic techniques. This accomplishes several things. It ensures your foundation remains solid. It often reveals new depth in things you thought you fully understood. And it's usually quick because you're practiced, making it an efficient use of time. Champion athletes drill fundamentals throughout their careers. You should too. These periodic reviews keep your entire skill structure strong. Finally, our 10th principle creates positive momentum. Reinforce your learning habits with small rewards. Building consistent learning habits requires more than just willpower. It helps to create positive associations with the behaviors you want to maintain. After completing a study session, doing your daily practice, or reaching a small milestone, give yourself a modest reward. It might be something simple. A favorite snack, a short break doing something enjoyable, an episode of a show you like, time with a hobby, whatever brings you genuine pleasure. These rewards aren't bribes. They're reinforcement that helps your brain associate learning behaviors with positive feelings. Over time, the learning itself often becomes intrinsically rewarding. But especially in the early stages of building new habits, these small rewards help sustain effort until the behavior becomes natural. Don't underestimate the power of simple positive reinforcement in building lasting habits. These 10 principles about reflection and long-term growth complete our journey tonight. They remind you that mastery isn't about isolated bursts of effort. It's about sustainable systems and practices that accumulate over time. Plan weekly practice, review goals at each session, keep a learning journal, identify daily lessons, track small wins, set dated milestones, reassess priorities, learn from mistakes, revisit fundamentals, and reward your efforts. With these habits, you're not just learning. You're building a system that produces continuous growth over months and years, a mastery loop that becomes self-sustaining. And now, as we come to the end of our time together tonight, let all of these ideas settle gently into your mind. You've absorbed a complete system for learning and understanding skills quickly. From mindset to practice design, from memory techniques to reading strategies, from environmental factors to social learning, from encoding methods to long-term growth practices, you now have the tools to learn anything effectively. You don't need to remember every detail. The key ideas will be there when you need them, integrated into your understanding. Rest now peacefully, knowing that you're equipped to learn and grow in whatever direction calls to you. Let sleep come naturally, carrying these insights with you into rest and renewal. You've done wonderfully tonight. Sleep well.